In this video, we'll discuss a few points related to evidence for history essays. So let's talk about evidence, particularly as it relates to history. The information we have about the past, artifacts and testimony, is not facts. All historical evidence is fragmentary, biased, limited by point of view and our understanding of that time and place, subjected to translation and loads of past interpretation. All we have is the bits and pieces that have come down to us, words and objects, and those words in particular were made with context and intent now lost to us. Even if we had a time machine and went back to view a particular moment in history, we would still only have our point of view, literally whatever we saw from wherever we were standing, and our culturally influenced understanding of events happening to other people whose society and way of thinking is from another place and time. The point is, no matter how much we agree on its meaning, and we often don't agree on its meaning, evidence from history cannot be taken at face value. It must be discussed and interpreted in order for us to build a collective sense of the past and its impact on us. There are different kinds of evidence: artifacts, documents, oral history, and there are different levels of reliability, which, as you might imagine, is very important when we're talking about evidence to support our ideas. The levels of reliability involve how close they are to the events that are being described. There are primary sources, direct testimony from the time and place that we're talking about, people that are eyewitnesses or people who are part of the culture and that experience the events and phenomena that we are looking for. Secondary sources involve a scholar sitting down and studying the primary sources and interpreting them, drawing a conclusion from that information. This adds an extra layer of interpretation, an extra layer of distortion. It takes it further from the events in question, but because it's expert testimony derived from studying the primary sources, it's still helpful in corroborating an argument that you're making based on the evidence that we have. Finally, there's what we call tertiary sources, the third level. Tertiary sources are when somebody boils down all of the secondary sources on a particular topic and draws a consensus conclusion. This smooths out all of the dissonance and disagreements and contrasting or nuanced interpretations of the evidence by the secondary sources, by the experts in this field. It removes all of that and simplifies it to a single set of statements. Tertiary sources involve things like textbooks, encyclopedias, and most of what's on the internet. Things like blogs and videos about history and, of course, websites like Wikipedia. All of that just boil down all the relevant information and consolidate it into a single deliverable. That leaves out a lot of information. That adds a tremendous amount of distortion. That's why tertiary sources are not allowed for use in writing history papers. For writing history papers, you need to use primary sources, direct testimony from the time and place, and secondary sources, expert corroboration based on direct study of primary sources, in order to support your own interpretations and analysis. The mix of primary and secondary sources depends greatly on the topic that you're covering. Some topics, there are a lot of great primary sources available. Some topics, there are excellent secondary sources that you need to look at. For some assignments, you're asked to write about a specific source, and so that's the source that you're using. The important thing is that you must use only primary and secondary sources in supporting the arguments that you're making. So all this means that any essay you write will be made up of two things: the evidence and your interpretation of that evidence, the argument that you're making based on your sources. The two things need to be very clearly delineated. You need to be able to tell what's from your mind, your argument, your interpretation, your reasoning, and what's from other sources, other people's information, other people's arguments, other people's expert testimony. Otherwise, it might seem like you're claiming the work of others as your own. And that's no good. That's intellectual dishonesty. That's plagiarism. That's something that's not allowed in the college environment, in the academic community, in any kind of writing where you're making an argument based on information. You need to make it very clear what's your argument interpretation and what comes from your sources. We do this with citations, bibliographies, and footnotes. We use citations in order to make it clear what's yours and what's not yours, and also to allow anyone who's interested in the subject, who wants to dig deeper, to provide them a means of doing so by telling people where to find the information that you're using, the location, publication information of your evidence. So those are the two purposes of citations: to separate what's from you and what you're claiming credit for from what's not yours, and to provide a means for others to find the information that you made use of. A bibliography is simply a list of the sources you used, given alphabetically by author. There are different academic formats. Some professors prefer one or the other. There's MLA, there's Chicago, as we see here. What matters most is that the information is there so that somebody could find this book or this article, whatever it is. Somebody needs to be able to find it. And that means you give the information necessary to find it. If it's a book, then you provide the author, book title, publisher, and year. A lot of the books that you'll be using as you do research will be digital, but whether it's published digitally or published on paper or both, you still need to provide the publisher, the year, the author, and the title. If you accessed it digitally, you can also provide the URL, but what's critical is that you provide that book's essential information so that it can be found either hard copy or digitally. If the source that you're citing is a journal article, you need to provide the information necessary to find it as a journal article, hard copy or digitally, which is author, article title, the title of the journal, the volume of that journal, which is usually a particular year, the date of publication, and the pages within that volume that this article covers. You're not listing the pages that you used. You're just giving from page X to page Y of this volume is the article that I used. All of your sources are listed alphabetically. You need to include all the sources that you used. If you didn't use and cite a source, it shouldn't be listed in your bibliography. If it's cited in the body of your paper, then it needs to be listed in the bibliography. In other words, the bibliography is the list of sources from which you presented evidence in the main body of your paper. Footnotes are used to tell the reader that the preceding information came from one of your sources. That preceding information might be in any form. It might be a direct quote. It might be a paraphrase of your source evidence or data. It might be an idea that came from the evidence that you're working from. Anything that came from one of your sources that's not from your head, that's not your reasoning and interpretation, has to be cited in order to tell the reader that it's not yours, that it came from your sources. We do that by pointing to one of the items in your bibliography and adding where in that book or article you can find this particular piece of information. That's what a footnote is. A footnote points to one of the items in your bibliography and adds a page number. You can do this with either a footnote or what's called a parenthetical citation. For a footnote, any word processing program will have an insert footnote function that will automatically take care of placement of the footnote All you have to do is go to Insert Footnote and then point to the item in the bibliography. In most cases, all you need to do is indicate an author and then add the page number within that source that this information came from. If your bibliography has more than one work by the same author, then you can give author plus year or author plus the title of the work to distinguish it. What you're doing is pointing to the bibliography and adding a page number. So all you need to do is make sure that the reader knows which item you're pointing to. Alternatively, instead of a footnote after the information that you're citing, you can use a parenthetical citation. Put the same information within parentheses at the end of the sentence. Some people like footnotes. Some people like parenthetical citations. When I write, I use footnotes because I like the footnote information to be out of the way at the bottom of the page. Again, what's important is that the information is cited, that you have some means of saying, the preceding information came from one of my sources. It came from this source, and it's to be found on this page number. And with that squared away, you can then work from the information and evidence that you cited to build an argument that says, here's what this evidence means, here's what I think happened, here's how we can understand these people, this time, this place, this moment in history. If you are unsure how to do any of the things discussed in this video or that are required for your essay, or if you have questions or things that you want to try out or things that you're not sure about, talk to your professor in office hours, by email. Try to flesh it out before you submit the paper, and that way everything works out better. So use your instructor as a resource, and good luck on your assignment.